Namah Shri Shankarananda Gurupadambujanmane Savilasa Mahamoha Graha Grasaika Karmane. Welcome to our third session on Pancadashi Chapter 1. Last time we met, we went through the logic of why the self, that ultimate substratum, stripped away of any kind of conditionings, has to be the nature of existence, nature of consciousness, and the nature of bliss. It cannot be anything else but that. Now, when it comes to the argument that the self is existence and consciousness, that's relatively easy to understand intellectually and to appreciate at a sound level as well. Simply because when we go through the logic of what existence is, according to the definitions, and definitions matter so much in Sanatana Dharma, if we look at Srimad Bhagavad Gita, for instance, 16th shloka of the second chapter, Nasato vidyate bhavaha, tells us very clearly that which is existent and real exists in all three periods of time, past, present, and future. So we can strip away so many conditionings based on that and say, na iti, these are not existing. Whether it's by body, mind, intellect, whether it's anything I find in this creation. Consciousness as the self. That's also logically relatively easy to come to as a conclusion. Simply because anything that is self-effulgent is of the nature of that consciousness, and we can't name anything that survives on its own consciously. Everything has a borrowed consciousness, which is why this human body is a mass of blood, bones, bile, all of this put together. Without that spark of consciousness, it's nothing but a corpse. Nothing remains. It's just matter. So understanding what matter envelopments are, then understanding that there's a consciousness enlivening that matter envelopment, we understand that the self is the nature of consciousness. Now we come to this concept of bliss. This is not so easy to understand and own up. Because even if I say I am the nature of bliss, how often am I truly blissful? I can go to the source and say existence is where I come from, consciousness is what enlivens me. Cool. Bliss, however, have I even tasted what true bliss is? Now, we can say that there are momentary joys that I feel on a daily basis, whether it's at the level of eating something I like, whether it's the level of interacting with a loved one. These are all those momentary joys. That's not that ultimate bliss that's being pointed at. Now, the first question that comes to mind here is, I know, but I don't know. And I know that I don't know, you know? What that basically means is, I know that I am the nature of that bliss. I trust what the Shastra says. I firmly do believe it. But if you want me to pinpoint what does it mean to be that bliss, I can't really do that. I don't understand it at that level where I can own it up. However, I'm conscious of the fact that I don't know what that bliss is. That's very pivotal right there. It's not complete ignorance here. I do know that any derivative joy that I feel is derived from that highest bliss, but I don't really know what that highest bliss is. It's kind of an uncomfortable position to be in. Which means what? The question that should come to mind at this point is, how can I love that which is unknown? Think about it. Anything in this world that I love, I have to know about it to love it. There's no place in the world that I think of saying, oh, Hawaii, I love Hawaii. I have to have heard about it. I have to have seen photos of it. I have to have visited there. Something that gives me familiarity. That's how I can love something. Even when people love someone like a dream boy or a dream girl, they've seen something in a dream that makes them love that individual, whether they know it or not. Now, why are we using the word love here when we're talking about bliss? Because we talked about what the Upanishad says. Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati iti. Anything that I love is for the sake of me loving my own self. My own self meaning not just this body, mind, intellect assemblage. My own self meaning that highest self, which is my true identity. I love that the most. Now, going by the logic here, if I love something, I have to know what that is. In this case, however, if I were to know what that true substratum, true self is as my identity, I would be realized. So I'm not realized, yet I still love myself the most. Doesn't that bring us to a conundrum right here? How can this even be? Now, these next set of shlokas help me, guide me in this line of thinking right here. 11th shloka. Abhane na param prema, bhane na vishaye spruha, ato bhane pyabhata sau, paramananda tatmanaha. We start first with a universal statement that's given. There cannot be supreme love for that which is unknown. And the next logic that's being built by the Acharya here is, if I truly know what myself is as the nature of bliss, why would I be going for objects of pleasure in the world? If I have a penthouse suite that I own, why would I be going and living in some 100 square foot apartment? Would I ever do that? If I knew what I really had. Similarly, if I know I'm the very nature of bliss, independently happy, without any kind of conditionings, without getting that validation from any other external source, why would I go trying to seek happiness from relationships, from things that pamper this body, mind, and intellect? There would be no reason to do that. So obviously, I don't know that self. So it's known generally, not fully, however. Now, aren't there things I have general knowledge of but don't fully know? Many political or economic issues are this way, where I can read a tweet and I think I know, and then if someone asks me a few questions about that topic, then that's when I'm exposed and I show how little I know about this. It's like inflation. Everyone's like, yeah, inflation, it's bad. Okay, what's causing inflation? The inflated prices is what's causing inflation. Okay, what's causing inflated prices then? The fact that, the prices are higher than they were before. We just go into these loops like this, not really answering the question like politicians do. We just dance around it right there. That's general knowledge of something, nothing specific, however. That's what it's like. So, supreme bliss then is general knowledge. If you get the joke, you get it. Like general knowledge, like a general in the army. It's a How I Met Your Mother thing. That's where I got this joke. So, supreme bliss is known generally, but not specifically. How can we confidently say we know it even at a general level? That any kind of joy that I feel, no matter how momentary it is only derived from that supreme bliss. Just as this spark of consciousness that as an individual I think I have, that's borrowed consciousness. Chit abhasa is what that's called. Another name for the intellect is chit abhasa, chidabhasa. Abhasa means that which is reflected. Chit is that consciousness. So what I have in this individual envelopment right here is reflected consciousness from that substratum. Similarly, that substratum self, which is of the nature of bliss, I have a taste of that borrowed with the fleeting joys that I have. When we go to Pancadashi Viveka in this chapter, when we analyze the 5 sheaths, we'll come to how that happiness actually percolates into my Anandamaya Kosha, that bliss sheath, that most subtle layer in this ahankara that I have. So that's how we can say that it's generally known because that's where it's borrowed from. Now, here comes one of my most favorite parts of this entire chapter. There has to be some example given to prove that I know this happiness in a general way, meaning I'm not completely ignorant, yet there's something keeping me from knowing what it truly is. Now, this is where we see the brilliance of our acharyas. Vidyaranya Swamiji hits a home run here. He gives a beautiful example. Imagine there is a school concert going on, and all these children are singing on stage, and the parents are sitting in the audience. Now, they're singing in tune magically, and they're all lined up, and they're singing the same song at the same tempo. If you were to ask the parents, can you hear your child sing? What would they say? Can you hear your child singing? They would say no. But can't they, though? Can't they hear the child sing? All those voices put together, they may not be able to specifically point out that this is my child's voice, unless he's terribly out of tune. But even when all those voices are together, even if it's not distinct, technically speaking, the sound waves coming from that kid's mouth are going to their ears. Technically, they are hearing their child sing, just cannot point it out specifically. That is the example that's used in this next shloka right here. Adhyetra varga madhyastha putraadhyayana shabdavat bhanepya bhanam bhanasya pratibandhena yujyate. Pratibandha, the obstacle that is functioning right here is that even though I know this self in a general sense, I can't pinpoint that bliss factor. I'll pause here for a second. See how hard hitting this example is. The brilliance here is having to point out this specific delicate scenario of knowing something in a general way but not fully knowing it. We wouldn't even fathom this kind of an example here. That's the glory of our Guru Parampara that we have. Where, I've said this time and again, when it comes to philosophy, we point at Western philosophy as the pinnacle, the zenith of philosophy, and how they've come up with these different frameworks and they're so brilliant. This kind of an example, or this kind of a topic of knowing what that bliss is at an individual level, that's something that most of the world has never even been exposed to, this concept. And it's truly a travesty because you look at our acharyas and the way they've provided these examples to really help us understand and drive these points home is nothing short of brilliant. Yet, even as Hindus, many of us haven't gone through these kinds of texts to understand this. So, love for a culture is something we all want to cultivate. And I'm saying this especially during this time where we've just completed those 9 days of Navaratri. So many cultural things that we do. A part of loving that culture is appreciating the brilliance of the philosophy. And those philosophers who are able to generate these prakarana granthas, which are texts derived from the Veda, honing in on a few specific topics, and the examples that they give, how memorable they are, and how benedictive and educational they are too, to make connections to a broader point. So a beautiful shloka with an amazing example that's given to prove this very point, that something I know in a general sense but not specific, that is still a good starting point. That still proves I am this nature of bliss. I just have to know it. Now, going further, this is what it means to have intellectual knowledge versus a direct experience. If you look at those monikers that are given to describe a true guru, a true acharya in our lineage, in Mundaka Upanishad, there's one beautiful mantra that explains this. And it says the guru is that person who is a shrotriya and brahmanishtha. Shrotriya and brahmanishtha. Shrotriya means that individual who has gone through a systematic learning process of the Shastra. That means they've gone through the layers of studying the Upanishads, studying Srimad Bhagavad Gita, derived from those Upanishads, and studying the Brahma Sutras. Those 555 sutras codified by Bhagavan Sri Vedavyasji that specifically reconcile any seeming contradictions that exist in the Upanishads. This threefold compendium, when studied thoroughly at the feet of a certified guru, this is what it means to be a Shrotriya, having learned this knowledge thoroughly. But that's not the full step. It's not just an academic perusal. A true guru must also be Brahmanishtha, meaning they have direct experience of this knowledge. It's not simply intellectual appreciation or knowing data, but have they really felt what this is? Now, the irony here is, you and I are not going to know who a true guru is in that way. It takes one to know one. So only a realized person can know what another person's experience is that way. But with firm faith and conviction, we can say that the Guru Parampara that we belong to, as the children of Puja Gurudev, going up in that lineage, all the way through Bhagavan Shri Adi Shankaracharya Ji, Bhagavan Shri Vedavyas Ji, Parashara Rishi, all the way to Bhagavan Shiva himself, that is that lineage that we fall into. So rest assured, we have a system of the Guru Shishya Parampara that not only has this intellectual knowledge, but direct experience as well. And that is that final culmination and goal to come to. That's what separates this type of knowledge that we're studying here from any other type of knowledge in the world. The fact that this direct experience does not give some result of just knowing something. This direct experience ensures that I have no more births going forward. We look at Mundaka Upanishad. The question that the disciple asks the guru there to start off the Upanishad is, I know that there are many knowledge systems in our tradition. There's Vyakarana, grammar, Shiksha, phonetics. There's Jyotish Shastra, studying of astrology. All of this is there. My question to you, Guru, is, what is that one knowledge, knowing which everything else becomes known? Meaning, what is that consciousness principle that enlivens every other type of knowledge because it gives me the ability to know anything in the first place? That is what this knowledge is right here. So, intellectually knowing all of this is great. Feels like an accomplishment. Feels like it helps to get deeper into the philosophy. But it doesn't mean much if there's no direct experience. That is that final culmination to come to. Now going forward, what do we see? This next shloka, shloka number 13. Pratibandhosti bhatiti vyavahararhavastuni tannirasya viruddhasya tasyotpadanamuchyate. How do we know something? This is an epistemological argument here. How do we know what we know? The main principle to understand is we know something because it exists. If I look at something, I say, look, this is a cup right here that I'm holding. There's two aspects going on right here. This is one aspect. A cup is the second aspect. When I say this is, that isness is lending existence to this object. That word is right there is so key, that isness lends existence. So the only way that I can negate in my mind that I don't know an object or I don't know something is if I take away its existence. Think about it. If I tell you a phrase of something, ream bomb, okay? Ream bomb. That's a word I'm making up right now. If I say you don't know what ream bomb is, you've never heard of that before? If there is no understanding, just like I can't love something if I don't know it, similarly, if I don't know something, it does not exist for me. Might as well not exist. And even on a transactional daily plane, how often do I find that I walk by something without even knowing that it exists? Like you're about to run out the door, you have to catch a plane or you got to go somewhere, you're in a hurry, you're running late and everything. And it's usually on these type of mornings, you can't find your car keys. They're somewhere in your apartment, and you know that for sure. But the clock is ticking, you're running late, you're already kind of flustered, all right? It's a big day coming up also. For the life of you, you cannot find your car keys. And you look in those places where you'd expect to find it. Like I leave myself a little bowl on my counter where I tell myself I should put my wallet, my car keys, and my phone in there so I can grab it on the way out. But more often than not, I leave those things elsewhere and I'm frantically searching every morning. Now you look. Then maybe you ask your roommate or a friend that's there, hey, can you help me look then? And they have the biggest smile on their face. Because it was right there on the counter, right in front of you the whole time. You were just so flustered you couldn't even see it. So if I don't have knowledge of something existing, or I can't pinpoint what it is, and I'm ignorant of it, for me in my mind, it might as well not exist in the first place. From a subjective personal standpoint, then, my knowledge of something determines whether it exists or not for me. So there has to be some obstruction, even if that thing does exist, there's an obstruction that keeps me from knowing about its existence. Same thing for the self right here, where obstructions negate existence right there. Meaning what? I am the nature of bliss. But because I think I am this ahankara and individuality, with my oscillating emotions, with my lack of clarity of knowing what I am, because of my attachment to this body, I am kept from knowing what my true nature is, and I don't know this nature of bliss as the self. It's nothing but ignorance that is keeping me there. No other entity but ignorance. Where we find in the 14th shloka now. Tasya hetu samanabhi haraf putra dhvani shrutau ihanadir avidyaiva vyamohaika nibandhanam. Again, we go back to that example that we saw. That classic example of not being able to hear that child distinctly, but still hearing him in a group. The reason we cannot find his voice specifically, the obstruction there is he's part of that chorus. All those other voices put together, where they're all in tune magically, means that's why I can't hear my son. I can't hear him at all. So the sole obstacle then, like that's keeping me from knowing myself as this nature of bliss, is ignorance. Why is this important to see right here so clearly? When it comes to why I don't know I'm happiness, I could come up with so many reasons independently. Let's go through some of them. I could say that because of the circumstances life has thrown me in, I don't know I'm blissful because I have all these challenges coming my way. I could also make the argument that I don't know myself as the nature of bliss because there is some entity working against me. Bhagavan has it out for me. He has his favorites who are other people. I'm one of his least favorites. He doesn't like me. Therefore, he's giving me all these challenges. I can go that route as well. I can also go the route of there is no such thing as that bliss in the world. It's just all a pipe dream. That if I try this hard to find that bliss and happiness, and I'm only able to have temporary happiness, there must not be such a thing. Because in my heights of arrogance, I feel like if I can't encounter something, it must not exist. Isn't that the best cop-out then? It's like the Wordle, right? You can't get it in 3 tries or 6 tries or 9 tries, so you feel kind of bad. But if everyone else isn't getting it, you're okay. If you don't get the Wordle and everyone else is getting it, don't you feel worse at that time? So I would want to believe that it's impossible to get to. I want to believe it's impossible to be the nature of bliss. That actually makes me feel better than thinking that there's something obstructing me from finding that. So coming to this conclusion, ignorance is that sole obstacle that is so important to see. That holds me accountable in that I cannot blame any other entity for the problems that I find myself in. And the tricky thing about this nature of bliss is that any action that I do is only for that purpose of being happy. From eating to fill my stomach, from speaking to someone to form a relationship, all of this is to be happy. If you look at one of the most introductory texts that's a building block for Vedantic understanding, Ancient Maya Mission, it's Puja Gurudev's seminal work, Self-Unfoldment. You look at the chapter on happiness there. Puja Gurudev gives two designations to the seeking of happiness. There is Dukkha Nivritti, and then there is Sukha Prapti. Dukkha Nivritti is getting away from sorrow. Sukha Prapti is that active pursual of happiness. Don't they mean the same thing? There's a subtle difference there. Getting away from sorrow and reaching towards happiness, it could be a similar baseline, but they're different. In what way? Classic example is, imagine you find yourself in some kind of physical discomfort. You've just, walked all day long, your legs hurt, your back hurts, you have a headache from walking in the sun and everything. That moment you're able to lay down in bed, not have to stand anymore, that is the biggest relief. Can you say that you found happiness by doing that? You found relief more than anything. And finding that relief in itself is dukkha nivritti, or getting away from sorrow there. But if you were to say, what does it mean to actually find happiness? Finding happiness means eating an ice cream on top of that then. That's actually going and gaining something. There's a difference between sukha prapti and dukkha nivritti, but whichever way we slice it, any action we do is for being happy. Whatever I accumulate, whatever I do. And the biggest irony here is I'm here searching for happiness everywhere all around me when I myself am the nature of bliss. That's the hardest thing to come by. Now, the next layer to look at here. After we've ascertained very clearly through these 4 shlokas that again, number 1, I find that I don't know I'm the nature of bliss, but at the same time, I love myself the most. By that logic, we find I know, but I don't know. Meaning, I generally know and experience what this bliss is. I can't pinpoint it, however. How? Just like in a chorus of people singing, I can't pinpoint an individual, even though I technically do hear, the obstruction is other people are singing as well, therefore I can't hear. Similarly, even though I do know this and I experience it, I can't pinpoint this bliss because ignorance is what has taken over my personality. And because that ignorance has taken over, that is the one reason, the one obstruction. Now comes this next layer of what do I do about this now? At this next layer, it shouldn't be some high-sounding philosophy again. What can I tangibly do to understand I'm the nature of bliss? This comes from vichara, deeper thinking. Specifically, what kind of deeper thinking? The thinking I have to do here has to separate this fleeting joy that I find in the world outside, saying that I need to leave going after those temporary joys and only pursuing that ultimate bliss. That's the task I have at hand. The only way I can convince myself to do that regularly is to find defects of what I think is happiness around me. Finding defects in what I think is happiness around me. Isn't this pessimistic? No, it's realistic. Because what are those desires that I entertain the most in my mind right now? Things that I want that I don't have. Whether they be connections and relationships with people, whether they be certain roles that give me status, prestige, and clout, whether they be certain resources that give me some kind of monetary gain or tangible materials around me, all of these are things that I pursue in the world. And I feel these things make me happy, and because I felt that way for lifetimes upon lifetimes, compounding these vasanas, I refuse to go after this truth of understanding I am the nature of bliss, and I go after all of these objects time and again. Now is the time I must tell myself, these are the defects associated with these things, so that I turn away from them to understand what my true nature of bliss is. The first step to gaining this dispassion, this detachment, comes from intellectually understanding what the limitations are in going for these joys. Money, for instance. The famous philosopher Jay-Z once said, "More money, more problems," right? That's exactly true. Where yoga, accumulating money is one thing, kshema, keeping that wealth with me is quite another. That's a challenge as well. Which is why in 9th chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan Krishna clearly says, Ananyaha chintayanto mam. Don't think of anything else and be preoccupied with nothing else but me. Yoga kshemam vyahamyaham. I will take care of yoga, procurement for you. Kshema, sustaining what is procured as well. I will take care of it all. That has to be the argument that's given to me to convince me. That's what I care about the most, and if I'm convinced that Bhagavan will take care of that for me if I simply surrender unto him, then I'm more likely to do that. And doing that means understanding what are the limitations of going after these different objects. That's something I must deliberately do. So don't get carried away by a text like Pancadashi, saying that, okay, I'm understanding what the logic is right here. I'm understanding what these principles are. The examples are making sense. That's one layer to come to. What am I doing about it, though? Am I actively looking at what the defects of this world are to fully understand? Or do I have to go get beat up by the world time and again? Where I go in wholeheartedly into every endeavor thinking this is going to make me permanently happy. Once I'm settled, I'll be happy in this way. All I need to be happy are my health has to be great. Family members have to be in good relations with me. Monetarily, financially, I must be comfortable. When it comes to occupation and career, I must be satisfied and feeling purposeful. And I have to feel confident in myself. These 5 things, when do they all align at one time? Health, relations, finances, occupation, confidence, mental stability. There is never a time where all 5 of these come together. Yet, how much do I try to make these align at the same time? That is my fatal flaw. That is the ignorance talking right there. That is me not seeing the defects of the world, saying the world is this way and how it impacts me. Let me go towards something higher. I still keep trying to find happiness in all of these layers. Without coming to this knowledge and trying to look for that happiness there, that's one thing. Having this knowledge in my possession, intellectually understanding it, but refusing to experience it because I still want to experience only this world, that is the heights of stupidity that I live through. And that is what compounds my vasanas more and more. So can I go through these layers of understanding while at the same time still building this capacity to do vichara, specific vichara of seeing the defects in the world? If I can do that as a starting step, nothing can stop me. So in the study of this text, in small doses, as much as we go through the philosophical, logical aspect, the doing also has to be there. That goes hand in hand for every set of shlokas that we look at. So we won't go too much in depth. It's a lot of food for thought already. It's good to reflect over these shlokas we've looked at. And so we will meet next time. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha Harihi Om. Hariom everybody. Have a great week ahead.